neighbor, it's 7 on Sunday. My name is John, and today's theme is band members who betrayed their own band. Internal treason can feel like sinking in quicksand. Betrayal becomes so common that it's almost like Stockholm Syndrome, with members hanging around through constant chaos because it's all they've ever known. Not every story is heart-crushing or terribly tragic, but we're about to see a lot of bandmates go from friends to fighting to bitter enemies. So hit that like button for safety, and let's get right into the drama.
If you do not want to see me again, I would understand.
I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume most of you don't love stories where the guy behind your favorite band is a not-so-secret puppet master pulling the strings, but with Third Eye Blind's Stephan Jenkins, jerk would be putting it nicely. Younger fans might have no idea about the skeletons of their past, only seeing the good things their frontman has done with his fame, which to his credit, he has fought things like climate change among other initiatives. While that's great, it doesn't erase his horrible treatment of the bandmates who he clearly saw as rubber stoppers in the way of him closing the door on Third Eye Blind being solely his. Cracks were showing within weeks of the self-titled album landing in 1997. But it wasn't until January 2000 that the first major shift happened, with the savage firing of guitarist, backing vocalist, and key songwriter Kevin Cadogan. Tension grew with the awkward recording of Blue in '99, and with the band only getting bigger, Cadogan realized he was expendable, just an employee without a say, even though he co-founded Third Eye Blind. Several sources, including original band manager Eric Gottlieb, recounted the narcissism of Stephan Jenkins, something that drove him to go behind everyone's back and create Third Eye Blind Incorporated secretly upon their signing to Elektra Records in '96. Everything was entirely in his name, meaning songwriting credits, royalties, all of that important stuff. That's all going directly through Stephan. This shady behavior kept on looping. His longtime bass player Arion Salazar quit in 2006 after becoming disillusioned over lack of control in the band, while Jenkins fired Cadogan's own replacement in 2009 in addition to their longtime manager. If you think the past is in the past, tell that to Stephan, because he continues to harass and belittle the former members even now, failing to properly credit their contributions and things like anniversary re-releases, and even sending frequent cease and desist letters to any ex-member who mentions Third Eye Blind when promoting their own music or event.
You can't be too careful anymore when all that is waiting for.
Josh and Zach Farro, brothers? Bandmates? Backstabbers? Paramore has never been an easy ship to sail, but when a now infamous post went live on Josh's blog in December 2010, shit officially hit the fan. Those familiar with Paramore lore likely know that Hayley Williams was originally signed to Atlantic Records as a solo artist, with the label agreeing to the idea of a band, but only if they didn't get contracts. It seems pointless to blame Hayley for any of the contracts signed at the dawn of Paramore, because she, like all of her bandmates, were literal children whose parents and managers were constantly overstepping. There's loads of he said, she said with the dissolution, but where I used to find myself thinking, maybe Josh and Zach are onto something, Zach Farro's return as the drummer of Paramore in 2017 shot that down and made it clear who was really the problem. Still, both brothers put their name to the now deleted post where Josh vented his frustrations with the Paramore machine. This gave massive credibility to those already suspicious of Hayley, sending a fresh wave of backlash and harassment, some of which still lingers to this day. Josh's post made it crystal clear he was upset by Hayley and bassist Jeremy Davis straying from their beliefs, going on to talk about God so much in the blog post that I'm starting to wonder if he thought he was in a religious rock band? You could argue that Hayley backstabbed her bandmates by signing a solo deal to get Paramore off the ground back in '04, but again, everyone was underage, and in the decade plus since the Farros exited, she's more than proven her dedication to her bandmates by fighting for their inclusion, pay, and respect. The will they, want they of Tom DeLonge and Blink-182 is still a greater love story than Twilight. So, sorry Mad Skiba, I guess that makes you Jacob the Wolf? Blink-182 formed in the early 90s as a blistering punk trio with a very immature sense of potty humor. and it worked like a damn charm, powering them into the mainstream, topping the charts, until Tom decided he was kinda miserable. This led to him forming Boxcar Racer alongside drummer Travis Barker in 2002, much to the chagrin of Mark Hoppus, who assumed his bandmates were abandoning him right after they made it big. After Blink completed the promotional tour in support of their dark untitled masterpiece in 2003, Tom pulled a total dick move by refusing to talk directly with his bandmates and quit through his manager over email in 2005, only to do it again in 2015. Watch out 2025, Tom's got a Pennywise ritual brewing. One thing really stands out throughout the tumultuous history of Blink. Tom DeLonge isn't good at communicating his feelings, so when he pulls away, it's like a black hole that sucks him in 1,000 different directions. Angels and Airwaves, To the Stars, Macbeth Footwear, Boxcar Racer, Government Aliens. There is a long list of projects Tom commits himself to, sometimes leaving Blink with the short end of the stick. Tom rejoined in 2022 after several years away, so we can only hope that all the tension between members has finally cleared, leaving behind a drama-free version of the band that hasn't really existed since the early 2000s. Remember Live? Throwing Copper? 90s post-grunge? Lightning crashes? Them. And if you're expecting another typical story of members slowly leaving while the band falls away into obscurity, prepare instead for a very confusing rabbit hole. Popularity waned as they entered the new millennium, leading them to finally throw in the towel over email in 2009. From their inception in the late 80s, Live was relatively peaceful, aside from some minor headbutting around band payments and songwriting credits, but the pain lies on the other side of the hiatus. Live's trio of instrumentalists Patrick Dahlheimer, Chad Gracie, and Chad Taylor restarted the band in 2012 without their singer Ed Kowalczyk. He later tried and failed to stop them from using the name, but a deal emerged that convinced their frontman to rejoin Live in 2016. A few years went by smoothly, but the 2020 pandemic completely changed the band's dynamics, eventually leading Ed to publicly fire Chad Taylor over Instagram, with the other two getting the private firing squad. How nice. The rock vocalist shared that he now owned 55% of the rights to the band, which gave him hiring, firing power to get rid of the other members who allegedly fought constantly, so I understand why he wouldn't want to tour with the constant drama. I'm kinda making this one a bait and switch though, since I presented Ed as the sacrifice who seems like the asshole, but after a lot of research, including mulling over the Rolling Stone profile from earlier this year, I'm inclined to agree that cutting the cord was the only viable option for Live to continue on without imploding.
Don't know why you say goodbye, I say hello. Hello, hello.
I have a feeling 99.9% of you already know the story of the Beatles inside and out, but I didn't feel right leaving them off the list since, in its own way, this is kind of the ultimate tale of musical sabotage. The Fab Four may have floated on cloud 9 through the early years of the band, but Beatlemania accelerated the burnout cycle of drugs, infighting, quitting, sulking, rejoining, and fighting over every single note of music they produced. Each of the four quit at one point or another, starting with Ringo Starr in '68, George Harrison in '69, John Lennon later that same year, and finally, the nail in the coffin of the Beatles, Paul McCartney in April 1970. Depending on who you ask, who ruined the Beatles, who backstabbed them and caused their downfall. It might be John Lennon's intense relationship with Yoko Ono, maybe it's Paul McCartney for going solo, effectively squashing the Beatles. Ringo and George had their moments too, but none ring the alarm quite as loudly as Lennon-McCartney. The world's most popular band was slowly decaying from the inside, but they kept it together for a decade of sheer brilliance, the likes of which will never be seen ever again.
I'm about to have a nervous breakdown. My head really hurts. If I don't find a way out of here.
Reputation is everything, and if you've got one as bad as Greg Ginn's, you better hope you're as great a musician as him, because hand to God, I think that's about the only saving grace with this guy. Black Flag tore through the 80s like a Category 4 hurricane, adding vocalist Henry Rollins to the mix early on in the decade, leading to the band catching lightning in a bottle. A bottle Greg Ginn later tried and failed to recreate. The original version of the band lasted from 1978 to 1986. A revolving door of musicians came and went for various reasons, but they all seem to agree on one thing. Greg Ginn was a strict tyrant hell-bent on pushing everyone way past their limits. Verbal attacks would happen at all hours of the day as the guitarist pleaded with his bandmates to play even more shows on an already grueling circuit that almost never stopped, regardless of injuries, mental health issues, and beyond. He was unwilling to stop feeding the engine coal, even if it meant Black Flag flying at half-mast. Okay, so that was decades ago. Time has passed. Maybe he No. He went the Dr. Evil route and rebooted the group under the same name, with the current hired hands being treated like replaceable mini-me's at karaoke punk rock night. No one asked you to resurrect a peacefully resting corpse, but you did it anyways by forcing the new version of the band to record that disaster of an album, What The, in 2013, which is one of the saddest sacks of shit I've ever heard. Benjamin Burnley has to have seen all 9 layers of hell in the decades following the launch of the band that bears his namesake. Breaking Benjamin quickly became a household name in the aughts, but no amount of hit singles or chart-topping hard rock albums could stop the negative impact Burnley's alcoholism was having in tandem with an ongoing, extremely painful health condition. The frontman finally got sober to record their 2009 album Dear Agony, but after the successful rollout and tour in support of it, Burnley was forced to place the band on hiatus to prioritize his failing health. Their label Hollywood Records reached out to the band for permission to remix the song Blow Me Away, originally featured in Halo 2, to accompany a greatest hits album. This request was initially ignored, but in May 2011, his bandmates completely circumvented Burnley and approved the label's request in exchange for a private payment of $100,000 USD. Burnley and the band's management were shell-shocked. The level of betrayal from his 2 guitar players, Aaron Fink and Mark Klopaski, was unthinkable, leaving him with no other choice but to sue both of them for going behind his back to sign off on projects he clearly didn't approve of. A lengthy court battle ate up the next few years before they eventually ruled in Burnley's favor and awarded him sole ownership of the band. I remember watching for updates like a hawk because it was such a unique case, but to make things extra weird, the only guy not involved in the lawsuit who stayed quiet the entire time, drummer Chad Zalega, quit the band due to creative differences 3 days after they won the court case. There are testimonies out there of people, including ex-bandmates, alleging Burnley is to blame and that he wasn't paying the members enough and that Chad wasn't even considered an official member, etc. But I didn't find enough hard evidence to back this up, so make of that what you will. Well, I guess it's time to cut the cord on this episode of SOS. I hope you enjoyed yourself. If you did, please hit that like button, subscribe, and fear not, there's hundreds more episodes to catch up on at the playlist on screen. Other than that, follow me on Instagram at ARTVJohn, and I'll see you next time.